All right, so John Lynch spoke about why Nick Bosa is not in camp.
Yeah.
And where that all sits.
Seen various players, have not seen Nick. And, I would expect he's not here to start off. We're having really good communication with Brian Aralt. He's got good, competent people we have an immense amount of respect for, working for him. And we're working diligently to try to come to an agreement. I think the challenge is you're talking about a real special player. You're talking about one of the better players in the league. You could argue that could simplify things, but I think at times it's just finding that sweet spot and where the right spot. And we're committed to working towards that. Just spoke with Brian this morning. We're also committed. You guys might have heard Mike Brown today. We're going to keep things private. I always appreciated that as a player. I feel like there's some sanctity to those things. You don't want everything being aired out. And so we've agreed with Brian and Nick to keep our dealings private. So I think that's the extent of what I'll say. And when there's updates, we'll give them to you.
Any worry at all?
No worry.
Okay.
No worry. Although I was told by many, many people that it would get done today. And maybe it gets done tomorrow when players actually get on the field and start doing stuff. So we'll keep an eye on Twitter and Threads and all of your other social media networks to see if anything breaks between now and then. But I would have thought that the deal would get announced before they actually get camp underway, which is tomorrow, the first real practice, because you want to have him out there. You don't want to have it be a distraction. Well, it's not like he's going to fall behind.
Right, no. Distraction, I'm with you. You don't want that. Do I really care if he practices in July? No. I don't even care if he practices the first week of August. I come from Sean McVay's school. Your important players, just keep them off to the side for the majority of the month of August. And that's fine. Just be healthy. Be healthy by week 1. This is different. I hear what you're saying. You don't want it to become a distraction, nerve-wracking. I've learned to trust the 49ers when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
Because they've nailed it every time with regard to when they say we're going to sign a deal, they do. Even when it was Debo.
Right.
And Debo was over there on the other side being like, no, you're not. No, you're not signing me to deal. I want out. And the Niners are like, we like Debo. And we want Debo here. And now Debo's here. So I have full faith in this group. The only time that they're not going to get it done, they trade you, DeForest Buckner. They would have made a deal if they didn't think they could do this. So they'll do it. But you're also not wrong. Every day that goes by, you wonder, okay, you're talking about the sweet spot and you haven't achieved it yet. Why not?
This feels like a Parag Marate kind of situation where Parag, who's the capologist, who's done so well at everything that you talk about in terms of, the cap, whatever. Well, he looks at it a little bit differently. He says the cap, I'm on it, and he knows how to prolong contracts and do voidable years and, reconfigure the money so that players get more now or they get more later, depending on what works. And so I think that's the only question right now with Nick Bosa. It's how do we get you the most money that you want while making it the most amenable for us as
Flexible,
the Niners.
Yes. Yeah. Financial flexibility. Yeah, what's
Mark,
up,
you're talking about how you trust the 49ers in these kind of instances. This is the 4th straight year a big guy has been up for a contract extension. They got all of them done. George Kittle in 2020, he eventually signed on August 13th. Fred Warner, 2021, he signed on July 21st. Deebo Samuel last year signed on July 31st. So I think I'm with both of you guys. It's not a question of if. Really, the only question is when it gets done.
Right, and my bet is while fans may sit here and go, hey, pay that man his money.
Thank you.
He's going to be the highest paid defensive player, whatever, biggest contract. NFL. Yeah, thank you. Just do it. The flexibility matters. For example, are you a fan of Brandon Ayuk?
Good little player.
Because if you are, maybe the eyes, the way the I's are dotted and the way the T's are crossed, may be the difference between whether or not the 49ers can keep him next year. Because he's going to need his money. It was interesting, and Mike Brown, his name has come up. It was interesting listening to him talk about this with the Bengals, the owner of the Bengals. I think I saw this just yesterday, and he was point blank asked, in Cincinnati, the big three are Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. And he was asked, okay, financially, can you do this? And I won't go through the whole answer, but the answer was kind of maybe not.
Right.
It gets to a point when you've got great players that were all drafted around the same time or have contracts coming up at the same time where it's preventative to keep them all. He goes, Joe is the centerpiece of all of this. So obviously that's priority one. They're going to keep Joe Burrow. Now, what do you do from there? And you have to blend it with A, what does the player want? And B, just the realities of the cap. So when I listened to him talk, I was like, T. Higgins, he might not be on the Bengals for much longer.
Right.
And that's where Brandon Ayuk is. And so some of those finer points with whatever they do with Bosa, the flexibility that they will have to either get out of a deal or restructure a deal going forward may well mean the difference between keeping him and not. And I really hope they keep him. I think he's a wonderful player.
Of course, he's a fantastic player. And if you think about who the 49ers big three are, or even if you want to do a big five or a big seven,
that's interesting.
The quarterback is not among them. And that's the unique nature. And I'm talking salaries.
Well, right.
I'm talking about the salaries right now. If you look at this team, right now, your big three, Trent Williams is number one in terms of what he's making. And Nick Bosa is right there in terms of what he is going to make. And then you look at the other big boys, Kittle, and you mentioned Deebo Samuel and Fred Warner. And Javon Hargrave next year, his contract goes up. And then the year after that, it goes up even more. So as you look at this team in the future, and I think that's where the complexity comes in this year, Mark, because you've got a situation where, according to overthecap.com, the Niners have $9.6 million in cap room this year, and that's counting Nick Bosa as $17.9 million. So how much can you give Nick this year to still stay under the cap, but also knowing that next year his contract's going to go up?
Well, and you just keep in mind all these players you just mentioned, right? I'm looking at Trent Williams' contract right now, okay? Trent Williams contemplated retirement, supposedly, after last year. I don't know if anybody really bought that, but it's obviously something that's in the back of his mind. He's 35 years old. He will make $19.4 million as a base salary this year. There's also signing bonuses attached. He'll make even more than that. But it might surprise people when a guy is contemplating retirement to learn that he is signed with the 49ers through 2026. He still has, if you're counting this year, 4 more years on this contract. However, where's the out? That's what you always, that flexibility.
Sure.
The out is next year. It is after this upcoming season.
Oh, after 23.
In 2024, there is the potential out for the 49ers. So you start to wonder, based on a few factors, what is Bosa's deal? How does Ayuk do this year? If he goes over 1,000 yards again, do you decide, okay, now it's time for us to break off Brandon Ayuk? If you're going to do that, does that mean a Deebo trade? Does that mean that you let Trent Williams go? Does Trent retire? All of these things are on the table and need to be figured out, but many of them are based on how people are going to play and their health, and you don't know that. And so that's why I sort of support that the 49ers and Nick Bosa, like they're probably having what sound like very respectful conversations. Hey, Nick, we know you're amazing, and we're going to give you that number.
Thanks, dude.
Right? But we got to do this in a way that allows us to also take care of all your brethren and make sure you're on a good football team.
I get it, bro, but I'm going to want $100 million, dude. You know that, right?
You're going to get that. You're going to get that.
I just want to guarantee, dude. I don't want you to have to. I don't want you to sweat it, Parag.
Yeah.
I just want my $100 million, dog.
Who do you think you are, Kirk Cousins?
And
dog.
And you know what? If you look at next year in terms of not only Brandon Ayuk, which is a question, but Christian McCaffrey's contract goes up.
Yep.
McCaffrey bumps up to, I believe, a $14 million cap hit. Trent will be, I got him at 28 large next year if you bring him back. And Eric Armstead is at 25. George Kittle's at darn near 20. So this, I think, speaks to, and I hate to make everything about the quarterback, but as we go all the way down to, Trey Lance. If Trey Lance is not QB1, can you really afford in this construct to pay QB2 or QB3? Can you afford to pay him $10 million to be a clipboard holder?
Well, the 49ers have figured it out. There's always ways to manipulate it, as we've talked about. And yes, there are limits It's not like you can just snap your fingers and do anything anytime. But you mentioned McCaffrey. Why does his deal go up in 2024? Because he just restructured it. Technically, Christian McCaffrey has a base salary of $1 million this year.
Yeah.
That's
worth every penny.
Yeah.
And he got a bonus for 2.1 as well.
Right. But there's all kinds of ways to sort of maneuver this around. And, you combine the information of how did guys play? What's our situation? What's their health? All right, which contracts do we need to remove, maneuver, change, or add? So all of that goes into it. I'm not worried about him. I'm not worried either,
but I do look at it in terms of like who at some point will have to go, because you can't give Nick Bosa $100 million guaranteed. You can't give Nick Bosa $5 and $150 with $100 guaranteed and say, all right, everybody gets to stay. Ayuk, you're getting $70 million guaranteed, and you get to stay. And McCaffrey, you stay. And Trent, you stay. And everybody gets to stay, because guess what, Mark? In a year, not this year, but the year after next, you're going to have to pay your quarterback.
Yeah.
If Brock Purdy is the sauce, or if Brock Purdy's not and Trey Lance is, one of those two guys is going to get one of these $30 million plus a year deals.
Maybe. I mean, Trey Lance.
If they don't, then your team stinks.
Right. Something bad happened.
Right.
Yeah. But Brock Purdy is still 2 more full seasons away from even having that conversation.
Right.
You have to be going into year 4, so they've got 2 more full seasons of data on Brock before you've got to do anything. And I think when it comes to this conversation, that might as well be 20 years from now. Like, there is so much information that you've got to pull in on Brock Purdy and the 49ers situation before you figure out where he's going contractually.
Well, you're paying Brock or Trey. And if you're not paying Brock or Trey, then something went terribly wrong, and a lot of things will have to change.
Sure.
And I also think that, to your point about 2 years is a long time, will Trent Williams still be on the team in 2025? Or is that a contract that comes off the books? If he retires, then now you have an ability to give a lot of that money to your quarterback.
Right. Well, I mean, it's hard to say these things in the moment because you're like, no, we cannot have George Kittle. But, I mean, how does Kittle look in 2 years? Does he feel like he's starting to get old? Does it feel replaceable? This is the conversation that running backs are going through. By the way, how about waking up to Saquon Barkley coming to a deal and he'll be in camp on time for the New York Giants?
Good for him. It was a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah. And he has the opportunity to make about $1 million more than the franchise tag, which sounds like not much. But, it doesn't make sense for these guys to sit out. Nick Bosa is going to get $30 million.
At least.
Nick Bosa is going to get $30 million. TJ Watt is the highest paid edge rusher right now. He's getting $28 million. So,
and I think Aaron Donald's making 31. I know he's not an edge, he's the closest comp, I think, to Nick Bosa.
Yeah, no, his brother Joey is number 2, $27 million.
Yeah.
And Nick's way better.
Well, he's just way healthier.
Yeah, he's better.
If Joey's healthy, I think that there's a conversation, but Joey's never been healthy for all 17.
I hear you, but I think
Nick's better. I wouldn't say way better, but
he's better. TJ Watt is right in the same conversation. The top 5, Watt at 28, then Bosa 27, Myles Garrett 25, Khalil Mack and Max Crosby are both at 23.5.
Right.
Nick's getting 30. So, like I said, I don't think this is about the number. I think they know what the number is. It's 29 or 30 or 30 and a half or whatever it is. But it's about the guarantees. It's about the flexibility that's going to come along with it with this guy. But, yeah, I mean, without understanding the intricacies of the way all of this works, I go back to what I said kind of starting this conversation. I have full faith in this group when it comes to this conversation. I think a couple of things get prioritized and they do it well. They keep their flexibility well, and then when there is a drafted player, if you are drafted by the 49ers and you show to be a very good pick, you're getting your second deal. You're getting your second deal to stay
Eric
here.
Armstead, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa.
Ayuk will be next.
Ayuk should be next.
Yep.
But again, it gets to a point where you have to make hard decisions about players, and you can't keep pushing. I guess you can keep pushing the money down the road, but you mentioned George Kittle, and he still has 3 more years on his deal, and he's 30. So if he gets to a point where he's not as productive and you owe him, a certain amount of money still on the cap, and I'm looking at George Kittle right now.
Where's the potential out on him?
Next year, he's got it's a $19 million cap hit, I think, after 2025.
Potential out, I'm looking at Spot Track right now. Potential out 2024.
Right, which
That's
would be
what the potential out is.
I mean, I think the dead money there would be about $12 million, so you can get out.
9.8.
Okay.
9.8.
Which is, it's still a hit.
Yeah, no, it's a
you
hit.
You can get out, but it's a hit.
I don't see why they would want to at this point, but things happen fast in the NFL.
Absolutely.
You have no idea what injury is going to take place or what players.
Especially as physically as George Kittle plays.
Right. I mean, he's still just 30. He's still just 30, but he's also 30.
And he's been hurt in just about every season he's played.
Yeah, he plays one of those guys that plays kind of like Debo, where he plays with total reckless abandon, looks for contact. Speaking of Debo, this is one of the more interesting storylines I think that's been built this offseason, which is Debo Samuel came out a few weeks ago and just started kind of crushing himself. He hated the way he played last year. If you don't remember, this is from OTAs, June 6th. Listen to Debo back and forth with reporters.
Would you assess your season last year?
Oh, it was awful. It was awful.
In what way?
Every aspect.
Did that leave a bitter taste in your mouth?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Me and Kyle had a long meeting the other day. We watched tape. We talked about it. We put it behind us, and just going through the tape and just look how sluggish and like how bad it looked on tape. Like I said, just reflecting on last offseason, it kind of played a big role in that, and I never put nothing like that back on tape again.
Did you feel it as the season was going on, or was it not until you went back and watched it?
I was kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit for us, being in my routine that I normally be in for the offseason, getting ready to play because, like I said, a lot of distractions was going on. But, I kind of felt it, but I was just, trying to will my way to help the team in every aspect possible.
Okay, so that's the fear, is that something happens with Nick the same way it happened with Debo. Debo is admitting that there was a distraction leading up to camp, and that distraction was his contract, even though it got signed in July. So I think that's why the Niners were careful to be like, hey, Nick is not here, but he's working. He is working.
Well, we saw him at mandatory minicamp. Yeah. He was working. He was in the weight room, and he was doing all kinds of work. And he actually came out on the sideline. He didn't participate in the drills, but you could see him, and it's like, oh, yeah, he's been working.
Yeah.
He doesn't look out of shape. The guy's a monster.
He's insane.
So I'm with you in terms of I don't need to see him in training camp. I don't need to see him in preseason. I do need him signed, though, and I need this off of their to-do list.